picture this. You are in this elaborate, breathtaking gown. You've just, made a lifelong commitment to your partner. And instead of peacefully sipping champagne and celebrating,
Right.
you are literally sprinting for your life down a stone corridor because a mob of your own wedding guests is trying to physically tear the clothes off your body.
Yeah, and to save yourself from being trampled, you hurl your floral arrangement directly at their heads as a literal decoy, and you just keep running.
It's wild. Welcome to today's deep dive. We are so thrilled to have you with us. If you have ever wondered why we throw things at our friends during wedding receptions, well, you are in the exact right place.
Oh, really are?
Today, we are focusing on the highly chaotic history, the hidden sociology, and the modern reinvention of two classic American wedding reception traditions, the bouquet toss and the garter toss.
And to do this, we are pulling insights from a really fascinating, highly specialized article. It's sourced from the business section of the Weddizer website. And if you aren't familiar, Weddizer is this incredible industry platform. People use the Weddizer website for cultures and traditions purposes, and also to plan by guidance through articles related to niche event trends. It guides couples and planners through that incredibly complex world of bridal trends.
So our mission today is to unpack where these rituals actually came from, the psychological mechanics behind why they work or why they increasingly fail, and how modern couples are completely rewriting the rules. Because, okay, let's unpack this. When you think about directing a stage play, there is always a script.
Always a script.
And if a scene doesn't work for a modern audience, or if the dialogue is just completely tone-deaf to today's sensibilities, the director cuts it.
Right, they rewrite it, they adapt.
Exactly.
Because you wouldn't force a modern audience to sit through something that doesn't make sense anymore, just because it was penned a certain way 500 years ago.
Precisely. But then you step into the world of traditional wedding planning, and it's like we are all suddenly acting out a script that hasn't been updated in 5 centuries. It's so true.
Couples have to look at these deeply ingrained rituals and decide, well, do you blindly keep these old scenes or do you adapt them? And I think most of us attending these weddings have no idea that behind the delicate tulle and the string quartets,
The elegant traditions.
right, these elegant traditions are actually rooted in intense, adrenaline-fueled medieval survival tactics.
Survival tactics is the perfect phrase. The historical reality is shockingly aggressive. Because to understand why we throw things at our wedding guests today, we have to look back at why it started in the first place. And let me tell you, it was not about a fun photo op.
Not at all.
If we travel back to medieval Europe, weddings were not the polite, seated affairs you attend today. They were fiercely participatory. The guests legitimately believed that obtaining a physical piece of the bride's attire would bring them immense good luck.
Okay, I know we touched on this in the intro, but I need some clarification on the depth of this. When you say a physical piece, they weren't just asking for a spare ribbon, were they?
We are talking about actively destroying the wedding dress while she was currently wearing it.
Complete destruction. Guests would swarm the bride, desperate to grab a scrap of fabric, a thread, literally anything they could tear away.
That is terrifying.
It really is. But you have to understand the sociological mindset of the era. Textiles were incredibly expensive and labor-intensive to produce. The bride, in her finery, was viewed as a temporary vessel of extreme good fortune and fertility.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, her dress wasn't just considered fabric. To a peasant class dealing with high mortality and harsh living conditions, it was viewed as a magical talisman of economic prosperity.
It's like comparing these medieval wedding guests to a horde of Black Friday shoppers rushing a storefront at midnight.
Yes.
Only instead of fighting over a discounted television, they were fighting over the bride's hemline. So the bouquet toss, are you telling me the bouquet toss was essentially a tactical retreat?
What's fascinating here is how human behavior adapts to scarcity. Let's build on your Black Friday analogy because it's incredibly accurate. In a village where catching a lucky break was rare, human behavior turns competitive very quickly.
I can imagine.
So to avoid these grabby, desperate guests, brides started tossing their floral bouquets into the crowd as a defensive distraction maneuver.
Literally a decoy.
A literal decoy. While the mob scrambled to catch the flowers, which, by the way, were also considered lucky because they bloomed, the bride and groom would make a mad dash to the safety of their wedding chamber.
That completely shatters the romantic illusion of those reception photos for me. The bride isn't playfully sharing the love. Historically, she's throwing a decoy to save her own skin.
Exactly.
But hold on. If the crowd believed the fabric itself was the ultimate prize, they wouldn't just stop at the flowers. If they were acting like a mob tearing at a dress, the garter must have been an absolute nightmare. That is a massive boundary violation by any standard.
Oh, I was good.
They had to be going for her legs in the middle of this riot.
That is the horrifying reality of it. Guests were so determined to get a piece of clothing that they would literally tackle the bride to try and rip the garter right off her leg.
Wow.
It was incredibly dangerous.
So how did they stop it? I mean, did they hire medieval bouncers?
Well, in a way, yes. The groom became the bouncer.
Oh, interesting.
Right. To protect the bride from being assaulted by her own community, the tradition had to be forcibly refined. It became the groom's explicit responsibility to safely remove the garter himself and toss it to the male guest.
Okay, so it was a compromise.
Exactly. It appeased the crowd's aggressive demand for a lucky token while establishing a physical barrier between the mob and the bride.
So if you are listening to this right now, the next time you are at a wedding and you see the groom toss the garter, just remember you are witnessing a sanitized version of medieval riot control.
It really is.
Which raises a massive question for me.
Sure.
How on earth do we get from a terrified medieval sprint to a modern DJ playing Beyoncé while women politely line up behind the bride?
That transition is a masterclass in how society refines its rough edges over centuries. As cultures evolved, tearing the bride's dress became a major social faux pas.
And eventually a crime, I'd imagine.
Right, exactly, a crime. So the physical violence faded, but the underlying superstition remained. The meaning shifted from a literal transfer of wealth into a symbolic passing of romantic fortune, specifically to the next unmarried person.
Right.
And today, the execution of these traditions is all about highly choreographed structure. The Weddizer article breaks down the modern mechanics, the so-called rules of engagement, very clearly from an event planning perspective.
Yeah, I noticed that in the source. It reads almost like a stage direction.
It does.
For the bouquet toss, the DJ or the MC formally invites all the unmarried women to the dance floor. The bride stands with her back to the group, and on a very specific musical cue, she tosses the bouquet over her shoulder.
And whoever catches it is, according to the modern superstition, the next bride.
Right. And for the garter, it's a parallel setup but aimed at the unmarried men. The groom playfully removes the garter from the bride's leg, usually while she's seated in the middle of the dance floor, and tosses it into the crowd of single guys.
And the catcher is declared the next groom to find prosperity. But looking at the Weddizer business section, you start to see the hit.
Yeah, silence would be brutal there. But I want to zoom in on a very specific detail from the text regarding the mechanics of the bouquet, because this blew my mind. Here is where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
The source highly recommends that couples commission a smaller secondary toss bouquet from their florist rather than throwing the bride's actual main floral arrangement. Why go through the trouble and expense of a fake bouquet? Why not just use the real one?
It comes down to physics and liability.
Liability.
Yes. Main bridal bouquets today are architectural feats. They can be massive. They are frequently arranged in heavy plastic holders filled with water-soaked floral foam to keep the blooms fresh.
Okay.
And they're secured with thick floral wire and wooden pins.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Yeah.
If you hurl a 3-pound, waterlogged, wire-filled floral arrangement over your shoulder into a tightly packed crowd...
You are going to give one of your guests a concussion, or at the very least, a black eye.
Wow.
Yeah, it becomes a very pretty, very dangerous projectile. Florists purposefully create a smaller, lighter toss bouquet specifically for this moment.
That makes so much sense.
And if we look closely, this connects to a much broader sociological theme in modern event planning, the shift from survival to intention. The modern execution is all about creating a safe, joyous moment that honors the couple, rather than causing injuries.
It's a far cry from throwing flowers to escape a mob, that's for sure. But even with all this modern refinement, these traditions are facing a massive cultural pushback. They just aren't universally loved anymore.
They really aren't.
Which brings us to the psychological friction point. The modern dilemma between nostalgia and our current social sensibilities.
It is a very delicate balance for couples to navigate. The Weddizer article lays out the pros and cons objectively. When these traditions work well, They inject a massive surge of adrenaline into the reception.
Right.
They break up the monotony of dinner, they get people out of their seats, and from a photography standpoint, they undeniably create some of the most dynamic, memorable action shots of the entire night.
You see guests leaping into the air, laughing, reaching for the flowers. But if you have ever been pulled onto the dance floor for one of these tosses, you know exactly what the flip side feels like. It is an immediate spike of social anxiety.
Oh, yeah.
You're sitting there enjoying your cake, and suddenly the DJ is commanding all of the single ladies or single men to the floor. So what does this all mean for the single guests? You're basically shining a giant stadium spotlight on their relationship status in front of all their friends, coworkers, and extended family. Is this tradition actually making people sweat instead of smile?
This raises an important question, and it is the crux of the modern dilemma. By specifically calling out unmarried or single guests, you are actively excluding a large portion of your attendees from the fun, while simultaneously putting the single folks on display.
Right.
Sociologically, the demographics of marriage have drastically changed over the last few decades. Being single isn't viewed as a temporary waiting room or a problem that needs to be solved.
Absolutely not.
Depending on a guest's personal life, being summoned to fight over flowers to prove you're next in line for marriage can feel less like a fun game and more like public shaming.
And the garter toss carries an entirely different layer of modern baggage. It's not just outdated, it's structurally awkward.
Very much so.
You have a scenario where the groom is going up his new wife's skirt, often with his teeth, in a room that contains her boss, her grandmothers, and a table full of toddlers. That clashes incredibly hard with modern boundaries.
It creates a palpable tension in the room between, well, we're doing this because it's tradition, and wait, why are we actually doing this?
Exactly.
Which is why the event planning resources emphasize one vital piece of advice: the absolute necessity of clear communication before the wedding day.
Communication is key.
Right. If a couple is going to include these traditions, they must communicate their expectations with each other and their vendors. They have to respect the comfort levels of both partners and the guests. If a bride is horrified by the idea of a public garter removal, it gets cut from the script immediately. No questions asked.
And because of that potential for deep discomfort, couples aren't just taking this lying down, they are actively seeking out niche cultural guides like the ones found in the business section of the Weddizer website to pivot.
Exactly.
They are finding creative alternatives that preserve the joy and the energy of a physical activity, but completely ditch the awkwardness. Let's talk about the mechanics of these modern reinventions, because this is where the cultural evolution is happening right in front of us.
The first and arguably most profound alternative is to simply make the traditions inclusive.
Okay, how so?
Instead of the DJ calling up only the single women or single men, they invite every single guest to the dance floor, regardless of their gender, age, or marital status.
Oh, I love that. I think the psychology behind that is brilliant. Catching the bouquet no longer means you are desperately next in line to get married. It just means you are catching good luck and prosperity for the year. You could be happily married for 50 years and still want to catch the lucky flowers. It completely removes the stigma.
It fundamentally shifts the power dynamics of the reception. It changes the narrative from, let's spotlight who is alone, to let's all celebrate shared good fortune together.
That's a huge shift.
But couples are also getting incredibly creative with the physical objects themselves. For instance, some opt to toss multiple mini bouquets instead of one large arrangement.
That diffuses the competitive tension instantly. Everyone has a chance to catch something, so you don't have guests throwing elbows like they're going for a rebound in the NBA.
Exactly. Another beautiful variation involves skipping the toss entirely.
Wait, really? Just skipping it?
Yeah, the bride might choose to formally gift her bouquet to a specific person. We frequently see this done to honor a grandmother, a mother, or the couple that has been married the longest in the room.
Oh, that's really sweet.
It takes a moment that is traditionally chaotic and transforms it into a deeply moving, sentimental anchor for the evening.
Okay, but my absolute favorite idea from the text, the one that feels like a true modern innovation, is the breakaway bouquet. Walk us through how this functions, because the visual is amazing.
The breakaway bouquet is brilliant from a structural standpoint. To the guests, it looks like one solid standard bridal bouquet. But it is actually 5 or 6 smaller floral arrangements that are only loosely tied together by a single hidden ribbon.
Okay.
When the bride throws it over her shoulder into the air, the ribbon slips off, and the bouquet unties and splits apart mid-flight.
It's like a floral piñata. Instead of starting a wrestling match on the dance floor where there's one winner and 50 losers, suddenly it's raining flowers and a half dozen people walk away with the prize.
Exactly.
It completely diffuses that aggressive medieval scarcity mindset we talked about earlier and replaces it with shared abundance.
It replaces anxiety with pure surprise and delight. Now, regarding the garter toss, the alternatives are equally grounded in removing the discomfort.